Jim, 34, a quiet and loyal office worker, married Kilara, 29, a bright but restless woman who works at a library. Over time, her boredom with routine led her toward Joan, 31, a charming logistics manager who lived nearby. Their secret affair began while Jim worked long hours. Only Mr. Paddle, 67, the curious neighbor who loved birdwatching, sensed something unusual in the couple's home before everything fell apart. Chapter 1. The Unremarkable Beginning. Jim never told anyone that his favorite sound was the click of their apartment door locking at night. It meant Kilara was inside. It meant the world was smaller, containable, and kind. After the wedding, their days folded into a gentle routine. She brewed cardamom tea that perfumed the kitchen. He washed the 2 cups, and both laughed at how the thin cupboard door rattled whenever the neighbors marched down the stairwell. They ate on the floor some evenings, cross-legged and careless, a makeshift picnic that needed only a towel and an open window. In those first months, peace had a physical shape, like light pooling under the table. Chapter 2. Work that eats the clock. The new job came with a badge and an unspoken tax. Jim counted it in missed sunsets and in the tired weight behind his eyes. On weekdays, he left before dawn, past the bakery where the first trays of bread steamed like small clouds, and he returned after the city had turned into a complicated hum of neon. He told himself this was a bridge year. He told himself that every overtime shift was a brick for their future. When he looked at Kilara asleep on her side, hair spread like ink on the pillow, he felt both proud and afraid that the future kept moving even while they were not looking. Chapter 3. A hairline crack. It began as a half-thought. Jim noticed that the jasmine bowl near the window was frequently empty on his return, though he did not remember the flowers losing their scent so quickly. He noticed a faint cologne that did not belong to him, a citrus sharp line that cut through their room like chalk on dark slate. On a Tuesday, the guest plate was not where it belonged. On a Friday, a glass in the rack caught the light, and he saw 2 fingerprints in the dust on the shelf, a width too wide for Kilara's hands. He did what people do when they love and are slow to panic. He explained it all away. Chapter 4. Joan, a name without a face. He heard the name first, not the man. A phone call answered in the kitchen while he was untying his shoes. Kilara said the word lightly, as if it weighed nothing. Joan. She laughed and said something about a delivery, about a wrong address, about how people in the building kept mixing up packages. Later, when they lay side by side, she mentioned that she had met a neighbor in the stairwell who worked in logistics. Jim nodded and asked about the jasmine bowl. She said the flowers were wilting faster in the heat. They both turned toward the window and pretended to study the night. Chapter 5. The Rhythm of Stairs. One afternoon, Jim returned early after a system outage cut his shift short. He climbed the stairs softly, a habit learned from long nights returning late. On the landing below their floor, he heard a low voice. It was neither aggressive nor hurried. It had that casual confidence of someone who already knew the route. He hesitated, and the voice dissolved into silence. When he opened their door, the living room looked staged, too perfect, like a photograph where nothing had texture. The jasmine bowl was full. The guest plate was absent. From the bathroom drifted the distant sigh of the exhaust fan. Chapter 6. Dinner that doesn't land. They ate rice and lentils, and Jim tried to focus on the grainy comfort of simple food. Kilara asked about work, her questions clean and precise. He answered with numbers, as if talking in totals would make everything measurable and safe. He watched her scrape her plate clear, a small, diligent spiral. He wanted to ask about the cologne again, to shape the air with a question and see if the answer made a dent in the room. Instead, he told a joke he had heard in the break room. She smiled in the correct places. He went to bed feeling like a radio station slightly out of tune. Chapter 7. An Invitation to Doubt. The neighbor across the hall, an old man who had taken up bird watching, stopped Jim in the corridor on a rainy morning. He complained about damp walls, then moved abruptly to praise the politeness of the young man who visited recently. "He wears decent shoes," the neighbor said, tapping his own scuffed pair for contrast. Not loud, not like the boys downstairs. Jim's chest cooled. He asked what floor the man had visited. The neighbor wavered, then said, "Your floor, I think." He carried a paper bag. No labels. Jim smiled and thanked him for looking out for the building, then stood in the elevator and watched the numbers blink like a small, calm countdown. Chapter 8. The quiet in her voice. That evening, Kilara spoke with a softness that made the room feel larger. She asked if Jim could work fewer weekends. She asked it without the usual negotiations of money and savings. He said he would try. When he asked what her day had been like, she described her book in detail, lingering on a passage about a character who longed to run away, but never learned to pack properly. He listened carefully. He had learned that love was not only doing, but also noticing. She noticed him noticing and turned the lamp lower. He kissed her forehead, and it felt like pressing his mouth to a secret he could not open. Chapter 9. The First Proof. Proof rarely looks like a confession. It looks like a small, plain thing that refuses to be moved by excuses. On a Thursday, Jim found a receipt when he shook out the laundry. 2 coffee orders and a slice of almond cake. The timestamp sat like a stone in the middle of the paper, exactly when he had been on a call at work. The cashier's scribble hugged a name in rushed handwriting, Joan. He stood by the sink and tried to make the receipt grow as light as a tissue. When it did not, he folded it twice and slid it under the sugar tin as if proof could be stored with sweetness. Chapter 10. The Man at the Gate. Jim saw him at last. Not in the apartment, not in the stairwell, but at the front gate when he returned on a windy evening. The man was shorter than Jim, but carried himself like someone who had never been denied something he wanted for long. He wore a pale shirt, sleeves rolled, and his hair was too careful for the weather. He held his phone like a passport. When he looked up and met Jim's eyes, there was a quick calculation there. A sizing up, then a slide into polite neutrality. He nodded. Jim nodded back. The world did not collapse. It was worse. It kept standing, exactly the same shape, with one more person in it. Chapter 11. The Kitchen Conference. Jim waited until Saturday. He brewed tea and invited the truth to sit down with them. He placed the receipt gently on the table as if it were a fourth guest. Kilara looked at it without touching it. She did not panic, which startled him. Instead, she rested her elbows on the wood and said that Joan was a friend, that they had met at the bookshop, that he had recommended a better translation, that sometimes he stopped by because the apartment was near his work. Jim asked why the visits happened when Jim was not home. She said she did not plan it that way. He asked why the jasmine bowl emptied and refilled like a tide that responded to someone else's moon. She said the flowers were delicate. He wondered if he had ever heard a more correct sentence that contained less truth. Chapter 12. The Dull Ache of Ordinary Hours. Days continued. That was the indignity. Jim went to work. Kilara read. The city ran on its grooves. The cologne grew kinder, almost familiar, like a neighbor's music that you eventually stop hearing. The bird-watching man across the hall identified a sunbird in the courtyard and knocked on Jim's door to announce it with shy pride. Jim congratulated him and envied the simplicity of naming what you see and being done with it. He wanted to name what he saw, but every name he considered felt like a verdict, and verdicts had a way of breaking houses. Chapter 13. Kilara's Hour of Bright Honesty. One night she spoke with a blaze that comes right before dawn. She said she felt caged, then corrected herself and said she felt fogged, like a mirror that never cleared. She said marriage had become a list of tasks attached to a gentle man. She said Joan made her laugh at wrong times. Jim felt the earth shift under the table. He asked if she loved Joan. She said love was a word she had used too early in life, and too often, and now it was as thin as a beat-up coin. He asked if she had slept with Joan in their home. She looked at the jasmine bowl, which was half full, and said yes. Chapter 14. The Long Walk. Jim walked for hours that night, past shuttered shops and thin cats, and a drunk man singing a patriotic song to an indifferent sky. He walked until the city looked like it had been photocopied one time too many. He did not cry. The sadness felt heavier than tears, like something made of dull metal that had to be carried in both hands. When he returned, he sat on the floor with his back to the couch and counted the seams in the carpet. He understood that people in pain keep doing small things because large things are impossible. He poured water and drank. He stood up and went to bed. He did not touch her. Chapter 15. Counsel offered in a crowded room. Because people do what they believe decent people should do, they went to a counselor. The office had friendly chairs and a demonstrative fern. The counselor asked them to talk about firsts. First meeting, first fight, first holiday, first secret. Kilara sat on the arm of the couch and stayed very still, like a statue that had been put somewhere temporary but kept being asked to live there. Chapter 24. The Night of the Phone. Sometimes endings are simple. They wear the everyday clothes of chance. Late one night, Kilara left her phone on the table and fell asleep on the couch, her face pressed into the cushion as if she were hiding from her own dreams. The screen lit and Jim, who had never touched her phone without permission, found himself reading because the glow was a small, insistent moon. There was a message from Joan, just 4 words that hurt as much as paragraphs. Is he asleep yet? Jim placed the phone face down as if he had closed a book on a cruel line. He went to the balcony and learned the particular sound a city makes at 2:30 in the morning when you realize the person you love is also the person breaking you. Chapter 25. The Plan That Was Not a Plan. In the days that followed, Jim moved like a careful ghost. He worked. He cooked. He spoke in full sentences because he still believed in language as a sign of decency. He set aside money without telling her why. He spoke to a lawyer who had old eyes and a new pen. He cleaned the balcony and found a small feather, bright blue, that must have fallen from a passing bird months ago. He held it and thought about the neighbor with his lists of sightings, and he envied the clean certainties of taxonomy, how a name could be a nest. Chapter 26. The Trial Separation. They agreed to a trial separation because the word trial made it sound procedural, manageable, as if the heart could be handled like a case file. Kilara moved to her sister's place. Jim stayed in the apartment and found that he did not like how well the rooms fit one person. He stopped buying jasmine because he could not bear to see the bowl empty, and he could not bear to see it full either. He took long showers and stood in the steam until he felt like a letter being steamed open, some stuck envelope of feeling loosening at the seams. Chapter 27. Joan's Absence. Joan vanished from the immediate geography of their lives, but not from the distance. Jim discovered that absence can be a crowded space. It filled the room where the guest plate had once been placed. It hovered by the window where the scent had once declared itself without shame. It leaned against the doorframe in the evenings when he came home and put his keys on the tray like a man returning to his own life after borrowing someone else's. Chapter 28. The Visit to the Bookshop. One Saturday, Jim walked into the bookshop where Kilara had said she met Joan. He intended to buy nothing. He intended to study the air and see if it carried anyone's voice. The store smelled of paper and coffee, a combination that felt almost medicinal. He stood by a shelf of translations and picked up a novel at random. The first sentence contained a stranger who did not yet know he was lost. He closed the book and put it back. He stood there long enough that the clerk asked if he needed help. Jim smiled and said he was only looking. He was telling the truth, and it still sounded like a lie. Chapter 29. The letter returned. Kilara visited to collect a sweater and found the letter in the drawer. She read it on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling in a way that was small and constant, like a tired bird hovering over the same branch. She asked if he wanted her to sign anything. He said he did not know. She said she missed him, but the sentence fell apart at the end, as if it had no strong verb. He wanted to ask what exactly she missed: the man, the routine, the river they had planned to cross someday when money was less tight. Instead, he asked if she had eaten. She said yes, a banana and tea. He nodded, and both watched the clock for a minute, because time is sometimes the only neutral object in a room. Chapter 30. The Small Cruel Dream. That night, Jim had a dream in which the apartment door clicked, and he felt his old relief. He woke smiling, and then the smile died carefully, as if trained to leave without breaking anything. He lay in the dawn light and accepted that healing may look less like triumph and more like the absence of immediate sharpness. He promised himself he would not become a man who needed bitterness to stand upright. Chapter 31. A careful inventory. He listed what he could keep: his willingness to make tea, his patience with small tasks, the way he remembered people's birthdays without reminders, the part of himself that had remained tender even when it hurt. He listed what had to be let go: the belief that effort alone secures loyalty, the idea that their home had been a private country, the habit of treating trust like a savings account that never needed auditing. He wrote it all on a plain piece of paper and taped it inside the cupboard where the guest plate used to live. He closed the door and stood there, breathing, as if he had just buried something properly. Chapter 32. The Rain That Helped. A week of rain fell hard and honest. The city smelled newly washed. Jim walked without an umbrella and let the water decide his mood. He passed the bakery, and the first tray of bread still steamed like small clouds, and he realized that some comforts survive almost anything. He bought 2 rolls and ate one in the doorway because he could not face the apartment yet. To his surprise, the bread tasted like itself. He counted this as a victory, small but genuine, a coin with real weight. Chapter 33. The Heart Conversation with the Mirror. He stood before the mirror and said the sentences he had avoided. He said, "You were not blind. You were in love." He said, "You were not weak. You were kind in the wrong direction too long." He said, "You were not alone. Your version of events was real to you, and that counts, even if it did not count to the others." He did not feel better. He felt organized, which was a start. Chapter 34. The Call He Did Not Expect. Kilara called near midnight. Her voice was threaded with exhaustion and a strange peace. She said Joan had left the city on a long assignment. She said the silence he left behind made her understand the noise she had brought into the marriage. She did not ask to come back. She asked how Jim slept these days. He told the truth. Badly, but less badly than before. She said she had begun to miss tea, the specific way he made it. They did not say more. They were careful, like people lifting a delicate object that belonged equally to both no longer. Chapter 35. The Line on Paper. The next morning, Jim signed the papers. The lawyer's office was cool, and the pen was heavy, and the world did not narrate anything special. He signed because he finally understood that endings are not punishments, but shapes that match the facts. On the sidewalk afterward, he stood still and let people flow around him, like water around a rock. He felt not free but unhooked, a quiet difference that he knew would grow into something he could use. Chapter 36. The Last Visit. Kilara came by to collect 2 boxes. They spoke like cousins at a funeral, respectful and affectionate from a safe distance. She touched the empty jasmine bowl and smiled at nothing in particular. She thanked him for not shouting in those hard weeks. He thanked her for telling the truth when it counted. She looked out the window and said the city was cruel and generous in equal measure, and that they had been both to each other. He nodded. At the door she paused, then said that there would be days when she would remember the floor picnics and feel both lucky and sorry. Jim said he already knew what that felt like. Chapter 37. The Neighbor's Last Report. The bird-watching neighbor intercepted Jim in the corridor with a shy excitement. He had finally seen the sunbird again. He described its feathers with a precision that was almost devotion. Jim listened and felt unexpectedly grateful for the old man's persistence. When they parted, Jim looked up at his own window and imagined the apartment as a neutral place, just walls and air and a bowl that could hold anything, not only jasmine and not only proof. Chapter 38. A Room That Learns New Light. He rearranged the furniture. The couch moved. The carpet rotated. He bought a small plant that he did not know the name of and put it where the bowl had been. The evening light fell differently now. He sat on the floor and ate bread and an apple without ceremony. He read a page of a book and did not force himself to understand every line. For the first time in months, he closed his eyes and the room did not tilt. Chapter 39. After. After is not dramatic. It is a collection of choices that look ordinary from the outside. Jim learned to leave work on time sometimes. He invited a colleague for coffee and talked about a cricket match with unambitious pleasure. He called his mother without the armor of humor. He visited the river and did not think about men arguing about fish. He thought about water as a long conversation with gravity. Chapter 40. The Quiet Room. On a late afternoon, the door clicked as he entered, and the sound felt different, but still good. He put his keys on the tray, rinsed a cup, and stood by the window. The city had its ordinary hum. The plant on the shelf accepted the light without drama. Jim did not forgive or forget in any ceremonial way. He did something harder. He allowed the story to be true, and also to be over. In the quiet room, he brewed tea for one and found that it tasted like a beginning rather than a remainder. Thanks for watching.